Good morning, everybody, and thank you for being here with us today on our Port Update. This program is sponsored by Tony Pope State Farm. Tony Pope first located in the Low Country about 30 years ago and with the office in Summerville in 1990. He was the first agent in South Carolina to open a second office in Mount Pleasant in 2012, and in May 2021, he'll open his third office in North Charleston. Congratulations on Tony Pope for all that expansion and for being our sponsor today. Thank you so much. Today's program is going to be recorded and will be available to all attendees. Before we get started, I wish to share that all attendees are currently muted for today's program to avoid background noise. However, if you wish to ask a question, we encourage you to do so by typing in the Q&A box that is either located at the bottom of your screen or the right of your screen. Time permitting, we will do our best to answer your questions at the end of the presentation. If we run short on time, we may need to follow up with you afterwards. Our state port is the economical engine of the state. Now, they say that because of all of the goods that come into the port for all of our businesses, and that has allowed these industries to locate not only here, but throughout South Carolina. And if you think about it, the port is like a very complex engine. You have new construction, you have maintenance, you have large ships, you have trucks coming in and out. It is just awesome. And it takes a visionary to have all this in their mind, this complexity. And so I'm really pleased today to introduce Jim Newsome. Jim Newsome is the president and CEO of the South Carolina State Ports Authority, and he's going to give us an update and share what future plans are forecasted for the port. I have to commend Jim. I mean, when I think about what he has to keep in his mind every minute of the day, and probably a lot at night, to make that port continue to run and service everybody. I just like to thank Jim because that is an awesome job. At this time, let's welcome Jim, and thank you, Jim, and I turn it over to you.
Well, thanks a lot, Elaine, and thanks, Simone, for having me today and giving me this opportunity. And certainly thanks to Tony Pope for sponsoring this session. And thanks to all of you here for overcoming what is obviously some form of Zoom fatigue to be here today and to let us tell you a bit about what we're doing in the port. It's been a very unusual year in the port, and we'll talk about that. And then we'll cover a lot of the exciting things that we're doing to continue to grow the port above the market. You know, I believe in organization, and those of you in business, I think, will agree with me that any organization to be successful has to have a discernible culture and a real clear vision and value statement that everyone can understand and sort of identify with. So we decided a few years back, we said we want to be the preferred port of the top 10 U.S. container ports. So for us to invest the type of money that we have to invest to be relevant, you know, to be a player in the global supply chain, we need to be a top 10 port. You simply don't have the scale and the real earning power to do this type of thing if you're not in the top 10. So we are firmly in that group of top 10 ports. We are the best working of the top 10 ports, meaning that an ocean carrier that calls our port, if they look around and they say, which port do we identify with, which port do we think does the best job, you know, of all the ports, we want that to be us. And then we had sort of identified a set of values that tie to that, which really were about being business-minded, being decisive, doing our work enthusiastically, focusing on customers, and most importantly, working together. As you know, in a siloed organization, probably the hardest thing to do is to get the silos to work together. So we really worked hard on that. And part of that was being in a new office here near the Wando Terminal, where we were really co-located with our team. We could see them every day in the cafeteria and have a real chance to collaborate. So I think we're on a good track. We've got a good culture here, and that's important to our success, because while we talk a lot about assets and infrastructure and cranes and lift machines, the real thing that makes this port work is the dedication of the people and the dedication of the maritime community, not just the port, but others in the maritime community. And we'll cover some of that as we go through the presentation. And I'm happy to take questions at the end of this. So please think of some good questions for me as we go along. So this time last year, we didn't know what to think. To be very honest with you, I just come back from Asia in February as Asia was shutting down. We were 8 months into our fiscal year. We're on a July through June fiscal year. We were handling record volumes, and then literally the world was shutting down. China, as you know, shut down briefly, actually, and then the Western world shut down. The automotive plants were shutting down. And so we were about this time making our budget for our next fiscal year, which starts in July. And I was extremely pessimistic. And as it turns out, we didn't have reason to be as pessimistic, and we'll talk about that. We actually will handle record volumes this year, which is quite a surprise if you think about it. We worked every day through the pandemic here. We were very fortunate. As I said, we built a very good office with a lot of separation, standing height cubes, things of that nature. So we haven't had a day when this office was closed. And that's a good thing because 90% of our people are working out on the terminal, and we need to be here to support them. And if you think about it, the port is it's a naturally social distance environment in the sense that most of our workforce is up in a lift machine, they're up in a crane. We don't greet trucks face to face, we greet them with technology today. So we had a good starting point to weather the pandemic. The big challenge in the port is capital expenditure. We will have spent in 2020 over $300 million in capital expenditures. We'll spend another $300 million this year because we're putting a new terminal into operation. That's a big lift. I mean, that's over 100% of our revenue. Most businesses, even a railroad that's a very capital intensive business, would spend maybe 20% of their revenue in CapEx. So we are really pushing the limits here to deliver long-term infrastructure. Had the good fortune to recruit Walmart Import Distribution Center 7 out in Ridgeville in Dorchester County. That's a big get for the port. We needed to transition from manufacturing to retail distribution if we're going to be successful. And there's no better place to start than with the largest retailer in the world, Walmart. And I think we talk a bit about how that plays into some of the needs that we have to be successful in continuing our growth. We handled the largest ship that we've ever had on the East Coast. It's a 15,000 20-foot equivalent ship to CMA CGM Brazil. We will handle an even bigger ship in May, the CMA CGM Marco Polo, which is a 16,000 TEU ship. It's as long as the ship that's currently stuck sideways in the Suez Canal. We don't have a risk for that here, fortunately, but big ships are really one of the things that's driving our investment requirements here to be able to handle those seamlessly. And a great success story is our harbor deepening project. So we are pleased to say that the Army Corps of Engineers has let now all 5 contracts in our harbor deepening project. And that project will be completed by this time next year. And it's a real signature achievement on behalf of the port because we'll have the deepest harbor on the East Coast at a time when it's really needed. We have a great board. They, are not very visible per se. They stay behind the scenes, but they give us a lot of strategic direction. Our chairman and 2 other board members have been 15 years on our board. So it's important to have this type of institutional knowledge. And then the total of 6 board members have been more than 5 years on the board. So it's a great group of people. They spend a lot of time, working with us, guiding us, understanding our business, so we can do the things that we need to on a very quick time frame to meet the requirements of our business. Organization is pretty straightforward. This is a very typical type organization for a port. Many of you know Barbara Melvin, our Chief Operating Officer. Phil Padgett's our CFO. Jordy Yarborough is well known to people in Berkeley County. She handles our community engagement. Micah Malice was just promoted to be our Senior Vice President of Sales and Marketing in a transitional role for Paul McClintock doing export projects. You have to grow exports as you grow imports. So we've got Paul working on that. And then Talent Solutions, what we used to call human resources, run by Beverly Coward. You look at the numbers in 2019, we had our busiest year ever, almost 1.37 million pier containers, slightly over 90 million in operating cash flow. 2020 ended up better than we thought, ended up about 1.32 million. This year, we will handle a record volume, about 1.385 million pier containers, and hopefully over 100 million in operating cash flow. And then next year, and that number is not correct, so we revised our forecast for next year about 1.45 million pier containers. So we are clearly committed to grow above the market here to fund our capital plan. And then on the last line, you'll see the fact that we we issue revenue bonds to fund our capital improvement program. So we have taken on rather significant debt, almost 1.5 billion in debt as we sit here today. But that was really according to plan. I mean, we have, a debt to total asset ratio, debt's about 50%. So we're comfortable with that. And we're very much on track with our long-term planning and certainly what we told the bond investors when we issued the last revenue bonds in 2019. So this is a bit of the before and after of the pandemic. Again, I told you we were 8 months into our fiscal year. We were ahead of plan. Life was good. 30,000 containers ahead of plan, headed for what we thought was a record year. And then as the pandemic set in, we pretty much lost 100,000 containers between March and June. So in 4 months' time, our outlook did change rather significantly. And so we were heading into a period of time which we were pretty uncertain about. And I'll show you how that ended up materializing in the next slide. So this is a chart. It's a rather busy chart. It's total import TEUs, 20-foot equivalents. So in our industry, we tend to measure imports as sort of the litmus test for how well the industry is doing, because that's finished goods. They pay higher freight rates. It's typically how the lines decide to deploy capacity. So you'll see what I'm talking about. From March through really July, you saw a year-on-year rather significant decline. May was the worst, about 18%. And all of a sudden in August, things changed dramatically. And what we learned was that when you couldn't go on a vacation, you couldn't go to your favorite restaurant or buy services in a pandemic where people were staying home, they stayed home and they bought goods online. So the consumption of goods really went dramatically improved. And what you'll see from August through February, and it's still occurring in March, double-digit increases year over year in import TEU volume. So this really created a much better outlook for us in the port. And obviously we're happy about that. I mean, we never really want to go backwards in volume. I mean, no business succeeds by not growing. So we kind of got bailed out by the consumption of goods. If you look at the 6 things we do every day here, they are portrayed here. Obviously, making sure the port works well. There are defined standards in our industry for getting trucks in and out, getting ships in and out. We meet or exceed all of those. Building timely and world-class infrastructure and capacity. I call it just in the nick of time infrastructure, so not too early, not too late. And so that's a big challenge in a world of uncertainty. What is trade going to do? I mean, a couple of years ago, if you recall, everybody was predicting that trade with China was going to decline dramatically due to tariffs, and sort of the world was going to come to an end as far as global sourcing. That never really materialized. In fact, might be interesting to you that 75% of the goods that come from China today are paying a tariff. So the idea that tariffs would somehow deter manufacturing in China has really been a big myth. In fact, Chinese manufacturing is probably as prominent as it's ever been. It doesn't mean some manufacturing hasn't been shifted to Vietnam and other places, but China is still the dominant manufacturer because they simply have a supply chain that works at the scale that's required. Growing our cargo base and altering our focus. I mean, this is certainly an area where we need everybody's help here because growing our cargo base is more and more dependent on having port-dependent land of significant size. So we need to work on that together. Obviously, intermodal rail, growing our rail footprint to move containers is critical. We've probably read a lot about that recently. We'll talk a bit about that here. Being thought leaders, transportation's not known for being a real cutting edge innovation business. A lot of the technology that we use to handle ships hasn't really changed a whole lot. But there are some areas that we're being a thought leader, and we're proud of that. And then certainly last and most importantly is attracting talented human capital. I think what you'll see in this presentation is this is really a great industry to work in, both from an hourly wage perspective, but just also the significance of the work and the interesting aspects of the work. There's never really a boring day working in this business. So in terms of excellence in operations, we measure everything here. And one of the things we measure to sort of know how busy we are is the daily truck transactions in and out of our terminals. And what I can tell you is that this is the number of truck moves in and out. In March, in the last couple of days, we've had over 8,000 truck moves in and out of our terminals. So business continues to be very strong. So if I look at truck traffic in the first 10 days of March, I can already tell you what our March is going to look like, from a volume perspective. And I think we're going to have a record March in the history of a record month in the history of our port this month. We have a stevedoring company that works with us. As many of you know, that the ports in the Southeast have a bit of a different labor model. We're not all union ports. We have state employees on the cranes and the lift machines, and they work alongside ILA union employees that are employed by a private sector contractor. And we encourage the 3 private sector contractors to form a joint venture here so they could achieve the right scale and be a good partner with us to optimize the operations in our terminals. So Charleston Stevedoring was formed last year. They've done a great job to work with us. They secured a new start time for ships, which is important. Ships can't just start right when they come in. They have certain designated start times on agreement with the union, so we have to work through all that. And we got a new start time at 1 a.m., which has really helped us a lot, because the name of the game here is to get ships in and out, as fast as we can with the right berth productivity. In terms of infrastructure, again, we measure in 20-foot equivalents. If you're driving down I-26 or 526 and you see a container, it's probably a 40-foot container, so that's 2 TEUs. It's a bit of a weird measure, but that's what the industry started measuring way back when most containers were 20-footers, so it still exists today. So you'll see that by this time next month, when the Leatherman terminal opens, the port will have about 3.5 million TEUs of declared capacity. So we'll handle about 2.4 million TEUs this year. We have about 3.5 million TEUs of capacity. When we open phase 3 of the Leatherman terminal, and it's about in 2033, depending on how we grow, hopefully we grow faster, so we have to open it earlier, we'll have 5.3 million TEUs of capacity. So the message of this slide is that we have really well planned our capacity going forward. And that's important. If shipping lines want to come here, if a Walmart's going to come here, they need to know that we have invested in capacity to handle their cargo. The asterisk here about North Charleston, you will all realize, is related to the Don Holt Bridge. The Don Holt Bridge is a height of air draft of 160 feet. So it's a significant constraint on navigation. Only about 6 of our ship systems out of 25 per week can go to the North Charleston terminal. Obviously, if the Don Holt Bridge ever needs to be replaced, we would suggest to the DOT that it's replaced with a taller bridge, but there'll have to be a lot of discussions that go into that. I mean, it's not just about replacing a bridge one day, but a lot of infrastructure that would be tied into making that a more significant terminal than it is today. When I joined the port in 2009, I knew we were building a new terminal. What we didn't realize was the impact of the deployment of big ships on our existing major terminal, the Wando terminal, which you can see in the background here. And this is a picture of the CMA CGM Brazil, which is the biggest ship that we've handled to date. So I think you get an idea of the fact that you need tall cranes to work over 9 or 10 high on the deck of one of these ships. And we didn't have those cranes. No port really had those cranes. So we were really playing catch up. We invested about $500 million in this terminal to make it ready to handle 3 14,000 TEU ships at one time. So we can do that today. We also increased the capacity there from 1.7 million TEUs to 2.4 million TEUs in doing so. So great work was done really in a 5 or 6 year time frame to make this terminal ready for the big container ships. And then this is the Leatherman terminal. It will open on April 9th. of next year, with the first ship being handled there, which is actually an inbound ship with BMW and Mercedes Benz auto parts on it. The first new terminal built in the United States since 2009. So you realize that this isn't something that happens every day. It's hard to permit a new terminal. It's hard to fund the cost of a new terminal. This terminal in 3 phases is $2 billion in capital expenditure. The first phase alone is $1 billion, $1.1 billion, because you stabilize all the land as part of the first phase. So I would guess, and I think I'm right in saying it's maybe one of the most expensive, if not the most expensive terminal ever built in the United States, because we live on pluff mud here in the low country. So it takes a lot to stabilize this land. And we actually had to reclaim 65 acres from the Cooper River to make this a 300-acre terminal. You really don't, you're not able to operate a terminal efficiently of this type in under 300 acres. As you know, from driving in and out of Charleston, it's got a dedicated access road to and from I-26, which is really cool. If you're driving into town, get off on the road and drive in there, and you just do a circle at the traffic circle, but it really gives a great panoramic view of that terminal, and I think you'll be impressed to see it, really. And then it will have our tallest cranes, 169 feet of lift height, and another 2.4 million TEUs of capacity. So this terminal will be the same size as the Wando terminal when it's built out in 3 phases. Then the harbor deepening, again, great project, 12 years from start to finish. And, you know, if you're like me, and I don't think 12 years is particularly fast in any endeavor in business, but I can tell you in the harbor deepening world, it's really, really fast. Most of these projects have taken 25 years. So essentially for $600 million, which is a federal state partnership, we will have gotten the deepest harbor on the East Coast of the United States at a time when it's really needed. There's a cost share here. As you know, the state legislature put aside $300 million in 2012. They loaned us another $50 million later than that because we had to fund the state share while we were waiting on federal funding. But I'm very pleased to tell you that all the funding from the federal government is now in place. And again, this project will be finished by the middle part of 2022. So great accomplishment for us. This is the cost breakdown of the harbor deepening. And I think you may have seen an article this week on social media that there were 8 to 10 dredges working in the harbor at any given point in time, which is, I believe that's a record for the Army Corps in a deep draft navigation project. So a lot going on to deliver this on time. So growing our cargo base, I mean, obviously it won't surprise you that we were very tethered to advanced manufacturing. I mean, you obviously know that BMW has invested $10 billion in the upstate since 1994. Volvo cars out in your neck of the woods, obviously. So from 2009 to 2019, our container volume doubled. We were actually the fastest growing port in percentage terms in that period of time, and it doubled almost 1-for-1 in relation to the doubling of advanced manufacturing jobs in South Carolina. And obviously the only major manufacturer that really doesn't use the port a whole lot is Boeing, because they fly most of their parts. But what we started to realize is that we were growing essentially on what is about 11% of the US gross domestic product, which is manufacturing. And we needed to broaden our base into retail distribution. And clearly Savannah and Norfolk, our 2 neighboring ports, had done much more work in that area than we had done. We were rather content with being in advanced manufacturing, but to continue growing above the market, we needed to change. And as I said, we started working on Walmart as the tip of the spear in making that happen. So what does it take to do retail distribution? Well, it takes land. And it takes the right type of buildings. So there are 2 types of buildings. One is a really small transload, 200,000 square feet, with about 7 trailer parking spaces for every dock door. So most people who build spec buildings around here do not put 7 trailer parking spaces for every dock door. So that is a very unique requirement for port dependent distribution. And then on the other end, you need big box land for big box DC. So the Walmart DC is 3 million square feet. So that occupies 300 acres of land. So we need a lot of land, a lot of trailer parking to do this type of work. And there's not a lot of that in the low country here. So it's a big challenge that we have to overcome if we're going to be successful in this area. And then as you grow import containers from a shipping line perspective, and that's my background in my career, you have to grow exports as well. So we've worked very hard on the export transloading, and some of that is in Berkeley County. We'll talk about that a bit. So I think there's a lot of potential both in Charleston and in Greer and Dillon, where our inland ports are, to grow retail distribution. And if we're going to be successful, we have to continue growing in this area. That is really the major thing that we need to do cargo base wise, because ships go to where there's cargo. So the starting point on that, we had a facility that was built back in the 80s. This is a picture of the Wando terminal from, really would be a drone almost over I-526. And this building is pretty classical transload, about 200,000 square feet without the right amount of trailer parking. So we really had to beg, borrow, and steal trailer parking on our terminal to make that work. So there's a company from Savannah Tradeport that is operating this building. We need good private sector partners to do this work. And they are handling the Walmart.com business. So if you buy something on Walmart e-commerce and it's from China, there's a good chance it's coming through this building. So they'll do about 20,000 containers in this building this year. Amazon will start doing business in this building in May of this year. So we will have achieved a presence with the two major retailers in the United States, really in a year's period of time, which is quite an accomplishment for us. But again, we need the right type of partner. Tradeport understands this work. They're in the retail transload business. They have the systems that support that. It's not work we typically do in the port. So having good partners is critical for us. And again, I talked about Walmart, $220 million investment, 1,000 jobs. So if you think about it, these are 1,000 jobs likely for people in Dorchester County who can stay in Dorchester County, live there and work there. One building of almost 2.8 million square feet. So it's 52 football fields in size and about 70,000 containers. So this autonomously will increase our volume by about 5%. And if you go out there today, it's like a big city being built. I've never seen so much activity. I mean, they're putting the building up fast, and it'll be open in April of 2022, and really not a minute too soon as far as Walmart's concerned. So it's their 7th import distribution center, and we're proud to have that here. And then, as I said, if you grow imports, you have to grow exports. So, and I used the line from The Graduate, and if you're significantly younger than me, you probably wonder what the hell The Graduate is, or who it is, or who Dustin Hoffman is, or whatever. But there's that great line in the movie about one word, plastics. So we kind of use a takeoff on that on this slide. So in Berkeley County, you have A&R Logistics. It's out in the West Branch Commerce Park, about 25,000 containers of export capacity. You also have A&R Bulk Pack, a little bit smaller, but very efficient facility. So 2 of the 4 facilities are in Berkeley County that are driving exports. All this cargo comes in via hopper cars by rail. The A&R Logistics facility and A&R Bulk Pack are served by CSX. It's bagged and transloaded into containers, and then it goes out of one of our port terminals. So we're very proud to have all of these players here. We're very much in the refrigerated cargo market. We actually have the number 1 and 2 companies in the world. Americold is number 1, Lineage is number 2, both having a presence in our port through autonomous growth and acquisition. Americold bought Agro, which is out near exit 199, 197 in that area. And then Lineage bought New Orleans Cold Storage. The colloquial term for refrigerated cargo in the shipping industry is reefer cargo. When I tell the later day hippies of Charleston that we're in the reefer cargo business, they get really excited. But unfortunately, I have to tell them that's not really what it is. It's about frozen chicken paws and pork. But anyway, that's exciting to me, even more so than it being in the reefer business or something. So cargo based, I mean, we've made a significant transition. That sounds a lot easier than it is. Potentially, it's been a big lift to get on the retail landscape, but I think we're well positioned to do that. And that's directly a result of the fact that we've taken time to understand that business. We brought in good private sector partners. We've identified some land that's suitable for this, but we need to identify more. Elaine mentioned Camp Hall. That certainly, if their mindset is correct about how, the drivers of that business, they can be successful there. So we clearly need to work on this together. Intermodal rail, we built 2 inland ports, one in Greer, one in Dillon. The one in Greer really sets the standard in terms of volume. When we opened it in 2013, I would have told you if we could ever do 100,000 rail moves there, that would be classified as a huge success. We're doing way more than that today. I think it's got 200,000 rail moves of potential. We're expanding it. And then our second inland port in Dillon, I clearly think it's got 100,000 rail moves of capacity. It services Harbor Freight Tools, which if you've ever been up there, they have about 4 million square feet of distribution capacity, which is serving the entire East Coast of the United States. The one imperfect part of our infrastructure is intermodal rail in the low country here. As you know, we're a multi-terminal footprint. When Wando was built way back in 1981, rail was not permitted here. That's kind of water under the bridge right now. There's not much you can do about that. So we have identified a need for a new intermodal container transfer facility adjacent to the new container terminal, the Leatherman terminal. So we need one terminal at least that has near dock rail, and then we can access that near dock rail from the Wando terminal by the use of a barge, actually. So we're working on that. You've read in the paper, I'm sure, that we've asked the state legislature for some funding for this, $550 million. It was never in our capital plan to build this. This is a project that was undertaken by Palmetto Railways with the idea of getting some federal loan funding, which didn't materialize. So the way to achieve this is to secure the type of funding which we've requested. It's not lost on us. This is a very, very big ask, but it is a very important piece of infrastructure to complete our infrastructure picture and hopefully get a lot of trucks off the road system as well and enable us to move rail containers more efficiently. In terms of thought leadership, if you drive down the road by a container, you'll realize a container sits on a chassis, and these chassis are, really have, 8 tires on them basically. And the problem with the current chassis pool here and really in the United States is they're old. So some of these chassis are 18 to 20 years old, and like an old car, that makes them more expensive to repair. So we are making a very bold move in the direction of lowering the average age of the chassis fleet here from about 18 years to about 2 years, making sure that all the chassis have radial tires and LED lights and anti-lock brakes. So really providing them the most efficient chassis pool and safe chassis pool that we can provide, which will benefit the truckers and really anybody on the road system in South Carolina, because you realize we have heavy weights here, and you often see the result of recap tires, which have sort of spun off due to the heats and due to the weight. So we'll introduce this chassis pool next year. I think it'll be a big step forward for the port. We are working to redevelop Union Pier. That is downtown next to our old office. There's a non-maritime component of that once we have a clear solution for the cruise terminal, and we think that's worth a lot of money. We've actually developed a partnership with Lowe Enterprises, which bought our office building downtown. They own the Wild Dunes Resort. They're really a great family business that are very ingrained in the city of Charleston, very committed to Charleston. And we think they're the right ones to entitle and help us develop and ultimately dispose of this property. Then we're trying to simplify our business. I mean, most people think when you grow your business, you should make it more complicated. Actually, we think just the opposite. We want to try to simplify, and what we're in the process of doing is bringing in a whole suite of non-operating systems that are cloud-based, hopefully with simpler procedures, less paperwork, more automation, and a more streamlined way of doing business. Then human capital. We were named one of the best places to work in South Carolina in 2019 and 2020, and we hope to have that recognition for many years to come. That's important to us because it's voted on by our people. So I think this is a a litmus test for if we're good managers and leaders. As you know, most people leave an organization because they're not very, they don't have a lot of time for their manager or their leader, basically. So I think it's a litmus test on us. We've got to be better in this area. If we're going to attract the best people, we got to lead them well. So I think we're on the right track there. If you look at and what a lot of people don't realize is the size and scope of the maritime industry. So we're not all under one brand like Boeing or Volvo. There's the South Carolina Ports Authority. There's three crafts of the International Longshoremen's Association, the union, their truck drivers, their warehousing companies, tugboats, pilots, etc. Totally about 10,000 jobs. So it's bigger in size than Boeing. About 30% higher average wage than the average per capita wage in South Carolina. So they're good jobs. They buy a lot of stuff in the local economy. A lot of them live in Berkeley County. And I would say, and I'm a second generation and last generation in this industry because neither of my kids want to do it, which is fine with me. It's an important legacy for future generations. We've got people on this waterfront that are 4 and 5 generations on the waterfront. They're proud of the work, and we want to provide an opportunity for future generations to work in this really great industry. So last thing is the activities that we're doing. So, we believe in being busy. I think an organization performs best when people have a lot on their plate. So I've talked about most of these. I won't go through these individually, but it's an ambitious agenda that will take us, forward for the next years. A lot to do, and all of these things are interrelated. Intermodal rail is about growing volume through our port system. Deepening our harbors about growing volume through our port system. Entitling Union Pier funds our capital plan. So it's an ambitious agenda. Our team is very committed to this, and I know we'll be successful in achieving it because of the dedication of the people that work here. So you can follow us on social media. We have a very active team on social media. We've got a good website. It's got a lot of information on it. And then a lot of social media outlets. You can even follow me on Twitter. I'm kind of taking a break from Twitter right now because I just decided to do that. I'm kind of depressed about college sports. That's what I mainly tweeted about. So I'm not really doing that much anymore, but I'll be back eventually. But please follow us, and I think you can learn a lot about what we do in the port. So with that, I sure appreciate your time and attention. I hope that I've kind of given you some perspective of the importance and the magnitude of what we do. Elaine, it's really not that complicated a business. I mean, we load ships and we load trucks. That's what we do for a living. And fortunately, I think we do it pretty well. So with that, I'll turn it back to you and answer any questions that you may have.
Awesome. Thank you, Jim. And Simone, I think I'm letting you handle these questions for us, if you don't mind.
Okay. So let's see here. We got a few. Is the port going to be acquiring the Denton shipyard property?
No.
Okay.
That was easy, right? So
That was very easy, quick.
No, that's a great business that we're not in that business segment. So they're great people, and I've enjoyed getting to know them over my time here. But we have no desire to do that.
And I think you did answer this, but what is the update on the Leatherman terminal opening?
Opening April 9th. We had an issue which we'd known about, which it's a very complicated labor relationship in the waterfront industry. The ILA and the ocean carriers have a direct employer relationship through an entity called the USMX. We don't have a direct employer relationship with the ILA, so that's why Charleston Stevedores exists. But they inserted a clause in their collective bargaining agreement back in 2013, which would have tried to dictate how we run the Leatherman terminal with an all-union model. And that's not how we run terminals here. So, we've got a great workforce, a highly trained workforce that does a lot of the work here. And it's always our plan to extend that model to the Leatherman terminal. The Leatherman terminal is really an extension of our existing operation. So we saw that clause as a secondary boycott, really, and we made a complaint to the National Labor Relations Board in January, and they've upheld our complaint. And we'll have a hearing on the 4th of May, but they have certainly stipulated that there should be no action against that terminal. And I'm very confident that we're going to prevail on that complaint. So we're opening the terminal on April 9th. It'll be an exciting day. And we'll have a total of 4 services moving over there. It's about 30% of the volume in the Wando terminal today. So we do about 1.1 million pier containers on and off ships in the Wando terminal today. We'll move about 330,000 of those over to Leatherman in the course of April.
Okay. On any given day, how many individuals are on the port working?
Well, I know that actually. So that's a hard, I mean, so we have a total workforce of 750 people in the port. And about 400 of those are crane operators, lift machine operators, heavy lift maintenance and repair of the equipment. And they would be working, I'd say, depending on what shift they're on and depending if we've got work at night, because we work shifts 24 hours a day. So let's say there's 300 of them working on ships and trucks during the course of, say, a daytime shift. And then say if we have 3 ships in port and 12 cranes working, there's probably another 400 people from the ILA working. So it's a significant workforce on any given day. It's a well-paid workforce. I mean, every ILA worker makes $36 an hour on straight time. They make $54 an hour on overtime. We don't pay them; they're paid by the stevedores, and we still have a hard time getting people to show up for work sometimes because they have other things that they're doing and whatever. But anyway, so I'd say close to 600 or 700 people directly doing operations, not including truck drivers, not including tugs and pilots.
Do you feel that our leadership understands the critical need to keep the port growing?
You talking about legislative leadership?
I would think so.
Yeah, I mean, I would say yes. Very clearly, we are grateful for the support that we have received. If you think about it, we have received $350 million for the harbor deepening. So the principle is that we fund inside the fence infrastructure. The state typically funds outside the fence infrastructure, such as harbor deepening. So they have funded $350 million for the harbor deepening. They funded $170 million for the port access road to the Leatherman terminal, which was a permanent condition. So that in and of itself is $520 million. We're asking them for another $550 million for the rail infrastructure. So they have been indeed very generous to us. We're very grateful for that. And I think, that's reflective of the fact that they do understand the importance of the port. I believe I'm right in saying, and CNBC said this, that South Carolina might be the most trade dependent state in the country. And I would believe that to be the case when you consider that 70% of the BMWs are exported, and particularly all of their container growth is exports. So yes, I believe for the most part people do, but I think it's important for us not to lose sight of the fact that we need to continually educate new members of the legislature particularly, but even existing members about what we're doing. We have a lot of opportunities to do that. We have a good form of governance. We have a review and oversight commission of the South Carolina legislature chaired by Senator Grooms. It's 10 legislators, 5 House, 5 senators who are directly responsible for supervising the port on behalf of the legislature. And then we also appear regularly in front of Senate Transportation and Senate Finance. The one place that we don't appear regularly is in front of Senate Judiciary. But I think since that's half the Senate, we need to spend a little more time with that part of the body as well.
Okay. what is the major concern you may have for the port moving forward?
Well, the major concern that I have is that we obviously stay on track infrastructure wise. I mean, you have to deliver infrastructure when it's needed. I think we've done a really good job of that. And I can safely say to our clients, our container line clients, that we've planned our infrastructure with the 3 phases of Leatherman for the next 20 years. Obviously, what's beyond 20 years is something we got to start working on, because we build long-term infrastructure. And this land question is a critical one. I mean, because we are not having the amount of identified big land. So you need, 300 acres of industrial land. I mean, and it's, industrial land is not always pretty. I mean, you don't have a playground in the middle of an industrial park, right? So we've got to be intelligent about working with the private sector to identify that. And that may entail us going further out. I mean, we clearly think there's an opportunity up in Orangeburg because there's a lot of land in Orangeburg. Certainly why we bought the property in Dorchester County, the Ridgeville Industrial Campus there, we bought that land with the intention of attracting Walmart. And again, I can't emphasize enough, our engineers sent the first draft of the Walmart building, what we thought a Walmart building should look like, to Walmart, we had 450 trailer parking spaces. And I think you could hear the laughter from Bentonville, Arkansas. And they sent us a draft back that said, well, no, it needs 2,250 trailer parking spaces, not including the 450 around the dock, around the building itself. So it requires a lot of land to do this, a lot of truck capacity. And then the other thing is obviously, being able to move containers efficiently. So having the right rail infrastructure and having truck capacity, making sure the truckers are healthy, that they can make a good living so that people want to come in this industry. Truck drivers in the container shipping industry get home at night. It's a kind of a unique feature, and it makes it attractive as long as we can get them in and out fast.
Okay. We got a few more questions. What percentage of the work is automated?
Well, so you can, so let's talk about 2 terms. Let's talk about automation. Let's talk about technology. So we constantly employ new technology in terms of the way we receive containers, identify them, scan them with cameras, weigh them with weigh and motion scales. So we use a lot of new technology, but we have not. I mean, you can pretty much automate a container terminal. I can take you to 2 terminals in North Europe, one in Rotterdam, one in Hamburg, which are run with essentially 10 or 15 people. We've chosen not to do that here. Number one, we have a good workforce. Number two, the capital expenditure for automation is about 35 or 40% more, requires a completely different type of operating system. So I think the worst world for us would be to have one sort of traditional terminal, one automated terminal. That wouldn't make a lot of sense to us. And there are some constraints in terms of the union's agreement with the ocean carriers about how much automation you can do. You can kind of only do half automation. So I would say if we could have fully automated the Leatherman terminal, we probably would have looked at it more seriously. We did look at it, but we opted for a traditional model, which is consistent with the way we operate our other terminals. And it gives us a lot more flexibility. When you automate a terminal, you are locked in to a certain operating footprint. You can only have 2 rail-mounted gantries over a stack. On our terminal today, if we need to put 5 or 6 RTGs over a stack, we can do that. So I think we made the right choice, not without a few sleepless nights, however.
What industrial segment would aid in the export growth?
So exports, so we as a country either export low-end stuff, raw materials, which are actually rising standard of living products in the emerging world, China, India, places like that. Or we export BMWs and Boeing planes. So there's just kind of 2 ends of the continuum. There's not a whole lot in the middle. So we export fluff pulp for diapers because diapers are a rising standard of living product, paper for, and cardboard material for e-commerce. Plastics, a big area. I mean, there's about 10 million tons of plastics manufacturing that is being introduced in the US Gulf between 2018 and 2023. We think about 2 million tons of that is coming to the East Coast. And then ag products. So American, dried distillers grain and soybeans and other ag products are rising standard of living products in emerging market economies. So those are the main areas that we're focused on growing our exports, basically. And the place that we probably have been the least successful, I mean, we've got a good presence on the plastic side. We have a growing presence in the forest product side, and we've been the least successful in the ag product side. And that's an area that we've got to further bolster our efforts. And that is an example. The Ridgeville Industrial Campus in Ridgeville is rail served by the Norfolk Southern. So we will hopefully have an ag products transload out there in a year or two time.
Okay. As you addressed aging trucks, is our rail staying current to growing needs?
Well, yeah, I mean, the rail is, there's only so many railroads, right? And I mean, we happen to be dual rail served is a greater area with Norfolk Southern and CSX. So that doesn't mean every facility has dual rail service. Everybody wants dual rail service. So there's very little dual rail service. So the railroads have defined a path forward, which is about efficiency. They're not growing their network per se. They make improvements, like between here and Greer, the Norfolk Southern is adding some passing tracks so they can make better use of their rail. But they are into making longer trains and doing something called precision schedule railroading, which sort of improves their economics, doesn't always improve the service. So it's a constant tension line for them between the cost of service and the quality of service, which they have to manage. And it's a bit, I always say it's like a McDonald's hamburger, you kind of get what you expect. It may not always, and nothing, no disrespect to McDonald's, but it's not a whole steak, right? So anyway, I think they've charted a path forward, which is what it's going to be. No one really tells them what to do, as you probably know. And then truck wise, I mean, we've got to make it where, there's all kind of moves in other parts of the country to force brand new trucks with all kind of new technology. And unfortunately, we're not doing that here because I think a lot of those moves are going to be met with failure, actually. It will be real problems for ports in California and places like that. But we have as our mission to make it possible for truckers to make a living hauling containers. And we do that by getting them in and out fast, relatively fast. And you certainly will find a trucker on a given day that didn't get in and out fast because they had a problem. But on average, we do that very well. And we need to continue doing that because without truckers, we're dead. Everything moves by truck. And we need to have a great respect for that industry. And I think people gained a respect for that industry when the toilet paper shelves were empty in the pandemic. People sort of figured out that it was a pretty important industry to nurture. So I hope that everybody will keep that in mind, when they see trucks out on the road.
Okay. And our final question, will the ship that's aground in the Suez Canal affect ship schedules in our port?
Well, I just, I sent an email to our board trying to explain that. So we've got 25 weekly ship services that call Charleston, like the flight that comes every day at noon. The ship system comes once a week, pretty much. And 6 of those cross the Suez Canal. And it's about 28% of our volume. So yes, there'll be an impact in terms of delay. And I think that largely depends on whether, how quickly that's resolved. I have no insight as to the details of it. I'm not a mariner. I'm not a ship captain. But that ship is pretty seriously lodged in that canal sideways, and they've called in some salvage people that they don't come for an hour's worth of work, is what I would say. So that I think hopefully they'll get it free by this weekend. Because if they don't, they're gonna have to start routing ships via the Cape of Good Hope, which extends the transit time for 7 days. So it's another challenge in an already challenged supply chain. If you follow the news, a lot of ports are dealing with congestion today. It's creating a lot of unpredictability in the supply chain. Fortunately, we're not dealing with that because we've invested in timely infrastructure.
Thank you. Elaine, that was the last question.
Awesome. Jim, they had you on a hot seat there for a minute, all those questions. But I want to tell you, I hope everybody really appreciates the port, because the port is one of our gems here in South Carolina and has really aided us in bringing large manufacturing into our state, which is a great asset to our employees with good paying jobs. And the vision that you and your board has, I have to commend you on that. And then your team, you've got a great team. So with all of that, I'd like to thank Jim so much. This will be on our website and we'll be pushing it out on our social media. I also like to thank Tony Pope with State Farm. Without our sponsors, a lot of this would not be available. And I would ask everybody to go out today and have a great day and be safe. Again, thank you, Jim, and take care.
Thanks,
Bye.
Elaine. Thanks, Simone. Appreciate it.